everyone, and welcome to Watercolor Wednesdays. And today's episode is going to be a day early because tomorrow, which is Wednesday, I have a minor medical procedure and I may not have time to do it. So I just thought I would do it today. And today's going to be a little bit different. And I especially want to address those of us who have always wanted to try to paint, but have been afraid to for one reason or another. And it is my belief that art is for everyone. And I'm even considering changing the name of Watercolor Wednesdays to Art is for Everyone, because that's my core belief as a teacher and as an artist. I believe that the world would be a much better place if we all had the opportunity to sit down and create something every day with a pencil and paper, some watercolor paints, any kind of paint, any kind of art. Whatever it is that we're drawn to, if we just took the time every day to sit down and play, I really believe that it would help us all in so many ways. And I think that many of us, from the very beginning, aren't encouraged to create, and for whatever reason. I think sometimes it starts very early in childhood, where we might have someone who tells us that we're just not good enough, or maybe we try it and our efforts never really match up to the vision we have in our mind, because we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. And this is just, in my opinion, the wrong way to approach art, because I think the beauty of art is that we all see things differently. And so for me, as an art teacher, I really get upset when my students feel like their efforts aren't good enough. Everything we do when we put paint on paper or pencil to paper is good enough. If it doesn't match our goals, then we can work toward our goals. But art is for everyone, and everyone sees the world differently. And how wonderful it would be if people would put down on paper how they see the world around them, that we could all share in the beauty of that in all of our uniquenesses. So today I'm just going to paint, and I drew kind of two rectangles on my paper, and I drew a basic pear shape. As you saw, I just drew kind of a smaller circle and a larger circle, and then I erased my other lines. So I just have this kind of basic pear shape. And pears are really super, because we all know their shape. They have a very specific shape, but they're all different. And so who's to say that this pear isn't exactly like a real pear out there somewhere, right? But I didn't think too much about it. I just drew it, and I'm basing what I'm doing on my experience of looking at pears. So when we take the time to notice something, we tend to notice how it looks when the light hits it, for instance, or maybe where the shadow is cast. And if we aren't paying attention to those things, by beginning to draw and paint, we'll start paying more attention, because the better and the more often we draw, the better we see. And the better we see, the better our drawings and paintings become. That is just the law. It's just a fact of life. So this morning, I put a pear on my husband's desk, and I noticed that the sunlight was coming through the window, which is over here on the left, and hitting the pear on the left side. And so the right side of the pear was a little bit darker, and it was even darker yet where it kind of hit the desk, and then there's a shadow cast. And so I'm going to keep that in my memory, because it's what I saw. It was my experience of that pear this morning. And I'm just going to put a make-believe background around my pear, and I'm going to start that by just putting a water glaze, just a light water glaze around my pear. And what this does is it just helps me. It's a technique that can help my efforts by stopping the paint from going into the inside of my pear. So I can freely paint the background, but I don't have to worry about it going beyond the line of water glaze that I paint. So I'm just painting water just really relaxed and painting water around the outside of my pear. I don't have to put too much, but just a little bit. And then I'm going to choose a color, and I don't know, that pear was really beautiful. I think I'm going to go with my Wild Thorn Ochre Leger, and I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just going to start putting down some of this lovely color. And I'm not being too precious with it. I'm just painting. And then I'm enjoying watching this beautiful yellow ochre paint and how it lays down on the paper. And you can see if I just put it down on the paper, I'm going to take it right down past the pear onto where it rested on the table. And you see how I don't have to worry so much about painting around it carefully, because that water glaze, it will eventually pull the color that I'm putting down onto the paper around it, and it will fill in where I didn't paint because the water kind of soaks the paint in there. So that wasn't too hard. And now I'm going to choose another color, and I think I'm going to use this beautiful wood violet. And I'm just going to start it around here and paint it around the pear, kind of paint it up to that table line. Just below it, so it'll move up to it a little bit and fill in the rest of like what would be considered the table space. And I'm just allowing that paint to spread and mix and mingle the way it wants to. Okay, so I can also just take water and drop it in here and there and just see how it reacts to the pigment and what happens when I just add water to it. And often you get some beautiful, surprising results after the painting is dry. So I'm just taking my time to appreciate this beautiful paint and this beautiful brush. I have my Sennelier 000 Squirrel Mop, which is just such a work of art, isn't it? I love these brushes. I love how they look, and I love how they carry paint to the paper. And now I think I'm going to take a break and make myself a cup of tea, let this dry, and then I'll be back to finish up. Okay, so my first layer is now dry, the background that I painted. I'm really loving what happened. I love the blooms that it created and the beautiful mixture of colors between the yellow ochre and the wood violet. And I'm really happy with this. So I'm going to continue on with my pear, but the first thing I'm going to do is take a kneaded eraser, and I'm just going to run the kneaded eraser over the edges so I can remove a little bit of those pencil lines. It's okay if they don't all come off, but removing a little bit is nice. Okay, so I want to emphasize too that when we try these new projects and we try something for the first time, so if you're painting the pear for a first time, it is your first time, whether you've used watercolor before or not. So the first time that I do something, I'm learning. Okay, I'm learning the steps that I need to take to make the painting. And then the second time that I do something, I'm practicing what I learned. All right, and sometimes it takes more than 2 times to practice. Sometimes you need to practice 2, 3, 4 times. But then the third time I do something, I can relax a little bit more and really enjoy the process. And I think this is important to remember because so many people try something one time and then they give up if it doesn't meet their expectations. So remember, we're trying to get rid of those expectations to begin with. And then we also need to remember that we have to practice in order to make progress. Okay, so I'm going to pick another color. And I think I'm going to use this beautiful peach agate. It's one of my very favorite from Wild Thorn. So I'm just going to wet that paint a little bit so we can get a nice little puddle in there. And then I'm going to put some water down on my pear. And I don't need to put it all over, but just kind of toward the center, because I'm remembering when I put that pear on my husband's desk this morning and the light was coming through, there was a really beautiful highlight, like right in here where the light was hitting the pear. So I want that to happen on my pear as well. So I put that water glaze down, and then I'm going to take the peach agate and I'm going to paint around the outside of the pear, and I'm going to let the paint hit where I put the water. And I noticed that the water dried fairly quickly, so I'm just going to add a little bit more in there. Sometimes that happens and we can re-wet it. I'm just putting on this light glaze of this beautiful pale peach agate. It is a gorgeous color by Wild Thorn, one of my favorites. So pretty, pastel. So you just see how I just lightly painted it around. And then I'm going to dry my brush off, and where I wanted that highlight, I'm just going to sweep my dry brush through just to bring up a little bit of that paint so I have my highlight reserved. And then I'm going to think about the next color, and I think I'm going to go with a little of the Bois de Rose or wood rose. I'm going to put some on my palette and add a little water to it so it's not too strong. And I'm going to drop it in to the water glaze in a few places to kind of create that look that sometimes pears have of blush. They kind of blush. And then I'm going to think of another color, and I think I'm going to use this Pistache. It's green. And I'm also going to put it on my palette so I have nice water in it. And I'm going to drop the Pistache sort of around where I put the wood rose. And I'm just going to watch what the paints do, because it's just so beautiful what they do. I'll take it as close to the edge as I can, down here to where the pear was in shadow, and maybe a little bit up here even. Then I noticed that I have quite a bit of water and paint on my pear, so I'm going to dry my brush off and just use the tip of it to insert into where I see the most water, and then dry it off again and just try to soak up some of that extra water. I'm really liking that. And then I'm going to choose a color to put where the pear was darker, so where the sunlight was hitting it here, on this side of the pear it looked darker. And I think I'm going to use a little more of the Pistache. And then I'm going to add some Sienna Brûlée. Sienna Brûlée is a reddish orange. And if I add some to my green, it's going to kind of give me a darker greeny brown. And I'm just going to drop that color in over on this side. It doesn't matter what color as long as it's darker, because remember, the sunlight was hitting my pear over here, and so over on this side it's going to be a bit in shadow. I'll drop a little bit more of that in where it was really in shadow. And then I'm going to rinse my brush and dry it off, kind of roll my brush to a point so it's nice and dry. And I'm going to take the tip of my brush and I'm just going to run it around the edge of my pear. And all this does is sort of smooth my outline, but it also helps coax the paint to the very edge of the pear. Now notice, I'm not being overly precious here. I'm just running it around. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for realism. I'm just looking for beautiful colors on paper. I'm soaking up some of that extra water again and dry my brush off and just do it one more time. And I love what's happening here. I love this really strong bit of kind of rose and how it's mixing with the green and then this darker green on the side. And I might even drop in a little bit more of that green. And I'm just dropping it. I'm just touching my paintbrush that has the paint on it. There, I'm really happy with that. So while it's still wet, I can continue to add color, and I might drop in a little more rose. And I might add a little more green. Because I'm just enjoying it, and I'm just noticing how everything is sort of coming together. Nothing I can do is wrong, okay? It's all just a process. It's an experience. I'm enjoying just watching what the paint does. I'm drying my brush off again, just running it around that edge. And then I think I'll take a little bit of my raw umber and just lightly paint in my stem. And where it touches the pear, it might run into there to the green paint a little bit or the wet paint, and that's fine. I like the way that raw umber looks. I might put a little bit down here. Just a little bit. Okay. So the next thing I want to consider is where my pear touches the table. I might want a shadow coming off to the side. So I'm going to grab a little bit of a shadow color. So I'm just going to use the same purple that I used, the wood violet that I used at the bottom part of my table here, and put some of that nice and strong on my palette. And then I think I'll add a little bit of the yellow ochre, the Ochre Leger. And between these two colors, I can just keep mixing them until I get a darker color. Basically, I'm just looking for more pigment than I used on the background to make it a little bit darker. And if it isn't dark enough, I can add in some brown. Just play until you get sort of a darker color. And then I'm going to think about where that shadow is going to fall. So if the light's coming this way and it's hitting the pear here, the shadow is going to be over on this side. And I'm just going to lightly paint a little bit where the shadow would meet the pear. And it's okay if they run together a little bit. Once I have that down, I'll just take my brush and clean it off, dry it up a little bit, and I'll run the clean brush on the edges of the shadow and just sort of pull it down toward the edge of the painted area. And if too much of it flows into the pear, I can always take my brush and sort of swipe through. And I just want to make sure that those edges are nice and soft so I can run my wet brush through those edges. And I can even drop in a little more right around where the pear meets the table. Just sort of coax it out a little bit. Sometimes it's a dance. You just dry your brush off again and swipe through. if it goes too much. But I don't think it's going to matter. Because remember, my goal is not perfection here. My goal is to experience these paints in this beautiful paper, in this brush. And the beauty of watching watercolor dry. It's really something. I think I'll add a little bit more because my paint is still wet. I can touch in some more of the rose. I just want to see a little more of it. And maybe even a little bit of the yellow, the Ochre Leger, up into this section here. Just to sort of bring some of that color in. Why not? Yeah, maybe a little bit more of the raw umber on my stem. Just a little bit to make it a little bit darker. And I can even run just a little bit of water right underneath the pear, just to sort of push that shadow away. And then drop a little bit more in. So I'm just enjoying it. I'm just playing, and as I notice things, I add more or I take away. Yeah. So I'm really happy with that. I'm going to step away now and let it dry, and then be back to talk some more. So now my pear is dry. I'm really happy with it. Look at all the beautiful little subtle variations in color just by dropping these different pigments in and letting them do what they do best. And that is, they paint without us. So what I thought I would do is start over here and do another one in time lapse, so you can just watch me do it one more time, and then I hope that you'll try this when you're finished watching. I do recommend that you watch the videos all the way through and then watch them again and work along with me. You can pause them at any time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paint the next pear. So now I'm finishing this one up, and I hope that was helpful for you to see just me doing one in time lapse, a little bit sped up anyways, just to see how I did another pear with using completely different colors. Okay, so my 2 pears are done, and what you notice now is that I took them and I tore them out of the piece of paper, and I do this sometimes when I make these quick little watercolors. And I just have a little folder full of them, and then when I need a nice note card for someone, I take a blank watercolor note card, or just make one with a piece of paper folded over, and then I glue this to the front, and it becomes a really beautiful little gift for somebody. I could also glue one of these to a mat board and frame it if I wanted to. They're just lovely. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and most of all, I hope that you will try to paint. If you have any questions at all, you can always leave them in the comments below. I am here to help in any way that I can. So I hope that you'll get out some beautiful paints like these Wild Thorn handcrafted watercolors, a lovely, lovely paintbrush, and some paper, and give this a try. Thanks so much for being here. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Kateri Ewing. And I'll leave a link for that below, and as well on Facebook at Kateri Ewing Watercolors, and I will also leave a link for that. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye.